when Phil Greenberg and I started our shop in '78, I had been working before as a repair person while playing in the orchestra in Grand Rapids. And when Phil and I got together, he had a wonderful collection of string instruments. He and his father both loved the violin and other members of the family. And so he already had a tremendous collection. And so I got to every day open the vault and look at the great makers' work and the great bow makers' work. And that was a special time. Well, then Phil would send me to New York to see Dario Diachilli, who at the time was retired from Rembert Wurlitzer's shop, and the person who had been running the shop for a few years. And here's a man that at the time was considered one of the finest experts in the world on string instruments. And so I would fly to New York and then drive to New Jersey and visit him and show him instruments that we had questions about. And he was very, very helpful. He'd always want to know what I thought, and then he'd tell me where I'd gone right and what I could look for that would teach me. He also had 50 years worth of photographs of the world's greatest bows. And he liked my work and said, "Steve, take these files with you and study them and learn your own style from these great makers' work." And so I had those volumes for months until Dario finally called me and said, "Steve, could I get my pictures back?" And I still have a copy of those. It's a real treasure to look at. While studying great bows, you find out what the masters did and how they worked. And the 20th century was a very good period for kind of bringing the bow to its full development. But I was a bass player, and I minored in cello. And so the low string instruments, I knew from a player's standpoint what I was looking for in a bow. And the popularity of my cello bows kind of sprouted Yo-Yo Ma, Lynn Harrell, Rostropovich. They all bought my bows. And so when the three greatest cellists in the world buy your bows, you feel as though you've done something right. And then when it came to the bass bows, there were so many orchestra members and principal players and teachers that purchased my bows. We finally, my wife and I, decided to kind of pay back to the bass world, and we began to have me make a bow for the winners of the competition that happens every 2 years through the International Society of Basses. And we did that for many, many conventions. When we started the business in 1978, Phil Greenberg and I, it was just a great friendship and a common respect, and also having wonderful instruments and bows around. I bought Phil out in 1990 because he's so very well known as a conductor and is busy going to Europe and conducting different orchestras around the United States. We simply didn't have time to work together. So I bought him out in 1990 and hired different people over the years and taught them how to repair the instruments and how to make bows. Then my son came to me one day and said that, "Dad, I want to do what you do." Now, he worked with me for many years. If I needed somebody at night when I was working to help me clamp up a bass or whatever, and he was right there. And so anyway, he worked with us and learned from me, and he learned from Steve McCann, who worked for me for 30 years. He's a marvelous restorer. And Aaron has a special artistic talent that I don't have. And so he finally made a copy of one of the world's finest basses, Vincenzo Panormo, that was owned by Larry Angel, the principal of the Cleveland Orchestra. And when he finished the bass, it just brought tears to my eyes. It was so beautiful. And playing it, I was really taken with it. Well, I had him enter it in an international makers competition, expecting that he would do very, very well. The judges didn't give him a prize. Now, I had won a certificate for tone for one of the basses that I made, but I thought for sure that he'd get one for not only the sound, but also the beauty of the workmanship. But I don't know why, but he was a gold medal winner in my mind. And he was so disappointed that he said, I'll never make another bass for a competition. It took a while, but I talked him into making one more. And this was for the convention we had in San Francisco. And I entered a bass, and he entered a bass. So, they start out by saying who won a certificate for tone. I won one, and I kept waiting for his name to come. It didn't come. And then they said, okay, a certificate for workmanship. I thought, well, he didn't make as beautiful a bass as the copy of the Panormo, but he wasn't aiming for that. So, well, his name didn't come up. And I just felt horrible. And then they announced the silver medal. Now, this is the highest that you can attain. And his name comes up. And I'm so excited for him. And then I got to thinking, hold it, he just beat me. That's not right. Well, maybe it is. So he's done a wonderful job, and he's got a tremendous following for his instruments. And as a father, that's really special. When my son took over the business. I was really excited for him. He had his own ideas of how he wanted to grow the business. They weren't mine, and I was hoping he'd do very well, and he has. I thought, well, he, just as a young boy, got to meet the finest bass players in the world, and they all love him. So I didn't have to introduce him to anybody. He made friends with them himself at the conventions. I have no qualms turning the business over to him because I see that what you need is provided here. You need to have great makers' works to look at every day to see, well, what did they do and why did they do that? And think about all these things. And it was a real eye-opener to see the beautiful instruments that he has here. He's got some of the great players' instruments, and they're all here, ready for sale. And that's the way it was in the early part of the business, but they were instruments that I had purchased and restored, and but he's carrying on this tradition of having great instruments and bows around, and also providing wonderful instruments for the beginners. And I never wanted to do that. I'd rather make a bow. So, but he's doing a great job.